Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is currently January 26, 2010, and this is Day 9 Daily number 56. Yes! Oh my god, I'm so happy to be here because today we're doing one of my absolute favorite games of all time, right? I'm going to mute the chat, and I'm going to put it at the very top so that way everyone can see. We are watching Calm versus Iris on Neo Harmony. I love this game because it's a great example of how to, do, I guess, what you'd call slightly unorthodox opening. I mean, basically, it's a no Mutalisk opening. It's complete emphasis on Lurkers and just getting straight to the late game. So we're going to get to talk about all those considerations. But first, I have to share all the wonderful stuff that's going on in the life of Day 9. I recently just got done with a class on business of games, actually, business and interactive media. And we have this Chinese foreign exchange student in my class. His name's Hua, and Hua is awesome. So, everyone's doing their game pitches, and people are talking, oh, this is an interesting shop simulation type thing. And, oh, here's a little way to make the museum exhibits more interactive. And Hua comes out and he's like, I want a kung fu game where you cook. And everyone's like, what? And he has this elaborate system where you swing a Wiimote around and you murder ninjas while cutting celery. It's so awesome. And I saw it and I was like, this will sell, man. Seriously, if I was an investor, I would just toss $1 billion at him and be like, make 4 of them, man. I want a whole franchise of ninja cooking games. So, I mean, it's a genius, amazing narrative. There's aliens from Glutonia who are coming, and they're going to feed you food that's not very good. And apparently it's going to end the whole world, food it's that bad. So you have to cook food, and you have to feed it to them to get them to go away. Genius! I loved it. Into it. I love this sort of creativity. It's fantastic. So anyways, coming right back to this game, I love this one. It's a little bit old school. It's actually from 2008, around Christmas time, so it's about 2 years old. No, that means it's about 1 year old. There we go. I knew something was wrong. I was like, I don't know if Harmony existed 2 years ago, but it's about 1 year old. I could be doing some of the more recent games from the Winners League and stuff. And by the way, a spoiler's about to happen. Cover up your ears right now. And then when I do this, I'm done with the spoiler, so cover your ears. Last night we saw in Hwasong Oz versus KTF. Jaedong was playing against Flash. It was this amazing game when Jaedong was playing really well. And then he just forgot Consume and lost, right? He had this huge advantage, and the Defilers are right there, and they run up, and then nothing happens, and they just, run back, and then Jaedong just, instantly loses. It was, the funniest thing in the world. I mean, I guess that has to happen when you're the best player in the world. I mean, every so often you're going to hit the wrong button. I know that as Protoss, about half the time to research Storm, I don't hit P. For Psionic Storm, I hit T for, the Argus Talisman. So I'm getting ready to, I'm going to storm the shit out of this Zerg. And instead I just have, plus 50 energy for my Dark Archons, and that's going to be a lot of good, right? Oh, God. Can't tell you how many times that's happened. But anyways, so, whoops, spoiler done. So yeah, we're going to come back to this game. It's a little bit old school. It's an excellent example of the sorts of things you want to be thinking about whenever you're doing something that's non-standard. So what I would consider to be the most standard thing in the world in Zerg vs. Terran is to open up 3 hatch and go into Mutalisk. And slightly less common, but still very common, is to just go 2 hatch Mutalisk and then to do stuff. You just get Mutalisks first as your layer unit. Lurkers used to be a little bit more common, then it sort of became even, and now Mutalisks are just way ahead. I just love this very interesting Lurker opening, but it's not a Lurker Ling opening, which is what's really cool about it. It's a heavily drone opening. And also, for any of you who watched the seemingly pathetic game between Calm and Fantasy in the OGN Star League round of 16, it looked like Calm just got murdered by Fantasy and didn't even do anything. But what we're going to see right now is probably the build that Calm actually intended to do. So let's actually go to the map. I know there's a lot of new viewers to this, so this map may be unfamiliar to some of you. This is Neo Harmony. It looks pretty standard. I mean, we have here are the mains in the 4 corners. So let's, again, pretend we're the top right. We have this natural right down here. What's interesting, though, is what's my third? I mean, technically, I could wander over here to this expansion, and this has gas, and it's on high ground. It's pretty tucked away. We see this neutral building right here. If you kill that off, you can actually walk units right behind it. There's actually even a little bit of space back behind that expansion to drop. So in other words, if I'm here, I can't really take this as my third, because my opponent can actually just kill this neutral building and then just siege this expansion. Or, if he's a Protoss player, he can just put some Dragoons there and get my drones to stop mining. So, I'll kind of probably have to swing around this way. So So that's a pretty interesting dynamic to this map, is what's my third going to be. The second one to note is this interesting terrain in the center. Notice that there's this nice little circular dynamic that's going on here. I mean, these ramps are pretty thin, but these fat ones closer to the middle allow a pretty decent amount of mobility, especially for small Lurker Ling Defiler groups. Also, this center is a really good place to control. We're going to see Calm exploit that quite a bit. But a thing I also want to... A word I used to describe this kind of map is that it's a big map. I know it's 128 by 128, but when I say big, I mean that the distances between the mains feel a little bit larger than usual. Things like these thin bridges that constrict movement, this weird high ground pod, it encourages a lot of players to go up to the center and then to go down back when they want to push your expansions. A lot of players don't want to just dart straight up here. So as a result, distances from main to main can be pretty large. Just as some more exaggerated examples, this is Katrina. This is an extremely large map. Imagine if I'm Zerg at top and I have a Terran at bottom, and I take this bottom left and this top right expansion. If Terran wants to kill off the bottom left, he has to sort of go up here and then swing around like this to kill it. And then to kill the top right, he has to pull back and then sort of go down, and I guess he would go up here and then... I guess down over this bridge and then up and then across and then all the way up here. I mean, that's a huge walk distance. It's pretty significantly friggin' obnoxious to deal with. So something to think about, what makes your map big or small. Python is an example of a very, very small map. I mean, look at the distance between this main and this main. I mean, we saw Iris versus Gigi play a few Day 9 dailies ago where Iris just straight up pushed right over to here super quickly, just darted right up there. There wasn't really that much that Gigi play could do about it. So we're going to be commenting a lot on the largeness of this map, the fact that there are lots of distance between these bases. So let's go ahead and make it 480p, thanks to this this new YouTube feature I'm not quite sure how I feel about. Whoa! Cranking the volume down. Yeah, people celebrating. Apparently I didn't time this too well. Let's actually just cut a little bit farther into this video. So we're going to see Iris spawning at the bottom left. We're going to see Calm spawning at the top right. There we go. That's what we like to see. So immediately there's a few things we note. We see that, ooh, good timing by me. Almost missed this frame, but we see Iris doing the very usual thing, scouting out, checking the main, going up. But we see this Overlord path like this. A good question always as Zerg is, what is your Overlord path going to be? And we notice that he's not sending it like this. He's sending it at this angle because that way he has some cover here if the opponent does, in fact, turn out to be here. If there's no opponent here, then this Overlord can safely kind of park his way up here and to this little patch of rubble to spot things moving across this bridgeway. Always important to think about where your Overlords can safely just sort of hang out. Usual 12 hatch action going on. I don't even mind squeezing in an extra drone because, again, this map is pretty big. A lot of early rushes, a lot of 8 racks type things aren't really going to be that favorable because of these big distances. So Terran players correctly opt for more economically focused builds, and even if they did 8 racks, you can still live if you build an extra drone and then get that spawning pool. Little things to think about. Not saying you should do that or that it's an error not to do that, but again, we're going to talk a lot about little adjustments because of the size of this map. Because of the fact that it feels very large, because these distances are big. And we're seeing Calm open up very normally. He's going to be getting a 3rd hatch here. While everything normal's going on here, let's take a brief look back at this map. The good question is, why aren't we seeing 2-hatch Mutalisk? 2-hatch Mutalisk is super popular. Don't overthink these sorts of answers. A lot of people tend to focus on the super little nitty-gritty stuff, like this weird little formation here, the fact that there's too much space here. I mean, really, it's just that it's hard to harass the natural and the main. Notice how all the minerals on this map are pushed right up against the side of the screen, like right up against the side. Very, very easy to defend against Mutalisk harassment. So I do like 3 hatch openings. Just get us a couple more units in there. Now, from Iris's point of view, we're seeing Iris do the normal thing. He's early expanding. What are you thinking about as you are in Calm's base? Everything's looking normal. Notice that 1 drone was transferred to the expansion. A lot of players auto-transfer 4, and this is a little subtle, so I'll come over here. In terms of probe transfer, or just really any transfer to an expansion, a lot of people just pick a number, like 3 or 4, and just sort of go with it. It's interesting. I would recommend that all of you play as Zerg, even if you're not playing as Zerg, and when your expansion finishes, transfer 2 drones, and then, play out normally and see how much money you have after a while, and then play that again, and put 4 drones there, and then let the money, play out. You'll notice that when you transfer 4 drones, you don't quite have as much money early on, and you get a little bit more money later on, once you get more saturated in drones. If you only transfer 2 drones, you have more mining in your main for a slightly longer time, so you can squeeze out an extra 1 or 2 things early. Very, very subtle sort of adjustments going on here. But it was actually a pretty big surprise to me, because I actually discovered that on accident. I just inadvertently transferred 2 drones, and I suddenly had more money at this key time that I really needed it. And I was like, wow, that's a lot easier. Let me just start doing that. And I mean, it wasn't huge. It was about 50 minerals, maybe like 35 minerals or something like that. But it was enough so that I could plant an extra hatchery that I didn't quite feel like I was able to. And not many Zerglings at all being produced. As Terran, we're seeing Zerg do this opening, and we're just saying, yeah, everything's normal. We're going to be seeing some Mutalisks coming up, some sort of layer tech. Nothing I'm concerned about. Not many Zerglings being made for Calm. He's just going to keep a few back. I really think it's important, though, whenever you get your first set of Zerglings out, to send one straight away to your opponent. See this little line right here? It's pretty important, because, once in a million years, you'll get these Terran players who just love just attacking you with Marines randomly early on, and they get surprisingly high success rates, because so few Zergs will just send their first Zergling out to check up on what's going on. But we're seeing nice, nifty action going on. All is well in the world of Calm. So drone kind of getting in the action, spitting a little bit on that SCV, doing a little bit of the puke in action. And we're going to see, some extra lings get added on. Still as normal as can be. Getting 12 Zerglings with speed, teching towards the layer. Nothing looks too awry. And in the Terran's base, this was pretty common for most early expanders. I still don't mind this at all. More recently, we see Terran players get the second barracks before the Academy and the Gas, so that way they have a few more Marines. I'm actually going to pause because this is a pretty key piece of location. But yeah, most Terran players nowadays like to just get the second barracks really fast and get a bunch of Marines, and then they get the Academy a little bit later, so they don't quite get the medics and the stim and the range up, but they have more units, and it makes them feel a little bit more comfortable when dealing with Mutalisks, harass, and this sort of thing. Or just, dealing with a whole bunch of Zerglings early on. What's nice about a lot of maps nowadays, like Fighting Spirit, is that you can build, like, one supply depot, and then the distance between this supply depot here and the command center is like 1 hex, so you can just sort of cram your Marines behind there. On Neo Harmony, look how big this space is, how dangerous Zergling's surround is. So that's why we're actually seeing both of those fire bats get made really early on, why there's that relatively fast Academy by Iris, because he really does need to make sure his ramp doesn't get broken. I really think Iris maybe could have done a little bit of a better job of dealing with this. I really don't mind early bunkers at all. But still, something to think about is Zerg. Wow, there's a huge wide open space right at Terran's ramp. Therefore, Terran needs to worry about Zergling run-bys, like this. And just the threat of that is going to dictate a lot of what Terran has to do that he maybe doesn't want to do. And see, look, more Zergling harass at the natural, picking off some additional SCVs. Now, 2 seconds ago, we did see the Spire going down in Zerg's main. So, again, you're going to look at this as Terran and say everything is normal as, from the Zerg's point of view. Or from the Terran's point of view. And, from the Observer, you look at Zerg and you say, yeah, Zerg's doing everything normally. But there's actually a Hydralisk den making in there. Yep, there are the Hydras. And we're going to see a ton of drones being made. Wow, that was, really well timed. Yeah, look, there's the den, there's the drones. Awesome. We're not going to see a bunch of Zerglings get made now. Those early Zerglings were for harassment. But this is what's going to happen with this build. You're going to send those 2 idle drones to mine, and then you're going to get about 4 Lurkers. There are the 2 Hydralisks just sort of wiggling into position. And notice that we're saving up larvae. We are not going to morph those into Mutalisks, but any Terran that scans that will see it and go, oh god, now I need to build a whole bunch of turrets, because they see everything building up. But in this time that you're letting your money drag up a little bit, that's when you go expand to the bottom right. or to the top left. That's just when you're expanding to another location. And there's the Zerglings sort of running around. We're not going to make an excessive defense. We are going to get 3 sunken colonies. Probably get away with canceling that. I think I recall Com canceling this. But that's, pretty typical to get away with that sort of thing. And look at this. We don't see any Mutalisks being made. There are 2 Lurkers being morphed at the bottom right. And, after seeing this game, I tried to do this build quite a few times, and it works out really, really well. It's incredibly fun to pull off. And see, there's the Lurkers at the ramp. In Calm vs. Fantasy that happened on Eye of the Storm, I think Calm forgot Lurkers, because those Lurkers at the Corner Expo just never, ever, ever, ever morphed. Now here's something a little bit unusual, is we have this Queen's Nest here. Let's think about the way that traditional Zerg vs. Terran flows. You get Mutalisks, you do a whole bunch of harassment, and then you effectively delay the Terran's mid-game push. That's pretty much the essential thing you're worried about. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to back up even more. I'm going to say, as Zerg, what are the big things that you worry about? You worry about getting a 3rd gas, and you worry about Terran's first big push. Because Terran can't really move out comfortably, because Mutiling groups will kill Medic Marine, and eventually the Lurkers sort of shut down movement paths. So, Terran ends up kind of just holding himself up right until he gets Science Vessels and a bunch of units and then does that big push forward. So just those are the 2 big ideas. Getting the 3rd base and delaying the Terran's mid-game push. So let's keep those in our mind. How do we deal with that as a Mutalisking player? Well, as a Mutalisking player, we go around and we harass a whole bunch, and he can't possibly go kill our 3rd base, or else he'll just lose to the harassment. Or if he does go and kill off the 3rd base, then the harassment will have done so much damage that it wasn't worth it. And because we're doing harassment anyways, even when our Terran player does pull back, he has to make all these turrets, he has to position all these Medic Marine, he'll end up losing some, probably even losing some SCVs, so it delays that push. So in a sense, the way we deal with the push when it does come out is by having the opportunity to have built up a little bit more. If you're opening up Hydralisk first, or Lurker first in this circumstance, you can't really do very much harassment. That's part of the reason why Calm builds that Spire and lets everything build up, is because it forces his opponent to make turrets that will never actually be used. There are no Mutalisks coming. It does not cost Calm that much, because he needs the Spire anyways to get Scourge. Ideally, he would like to delay it a little bit, but by getting it at this time, he's able to force his opponent to make more turrets. But now we still have the same question of, how do I deal with the Terran mid-game push, and how do I defend my 3rd? Defending the 3rd is easy, you just burrow 2 Lurkers at the ramp, done. How do I delay the Terran mid-game push? Well, it's going to be a little hard to delay. You're going to get slight delays on it, thanks to potentially making your opponent build Mutalisks, or build turrets to deal with Mutalisks. But really, that's why we're getting the Queen's Nest so quickly, is because we just need the Defilers. That is our primary tool to adequately defend against this inevitable Terran mid-game push. That's why that Queen's Nest is so fast. I've actually tried this style a lot, and I said, I don't need to get that Queen's Nest. And it didn't really end up working out so well. I just ended up either getting in super close matches where I barely won, or I got completely raped. And we don't like complete and total rape unless we're the ones enacting that. Here's some good little techniques. So, still notice how few Zerglings that Calm has. There are like no Zerglings anywhere. Just Lurkers. I thought this was brilliant. Tons of drones are being made by Calm right now. That's where most of his spare larvae are located at. And notice how he's running those Lurkers to the left. And notice how that will draw these Medic Marine out to the left. This is a beautiful little tactic. Just drawing them out, and then we're going to see some drones get transferred right along this way. Look at that. Forcing his drone transfer to happen properly. Easiest thing in the world. And really, Lurkers are pretty fast, so you can run Lurkers around and bait stuff like crazy. So here is the first really key component of the mid-game of this strategy. Yeah, we're rushing for Hive, and yeah, we've got our 3rd, but what stuff can we do right now with the units that we have in order to not be super passive? And this is what Calm's going to be doing. He's going to go up to that center pod, right? He's going to wander right up here. He's going to burrow some Lurkers. Because, again, players really don't want to be wandering around these little narrow edges. First of all, because it's hard to attack against. Second of all, because it's Lurkers do a ton of damage here. And third of all, because if we move from the center, we're attacking downhill. So center is really a good spot to control. And Calm's not going to do anything too fierce with it. He's not going to reinforce it hugely. He's just going to burrow some Lurkers here and try to maybe get some advantage out of it, but he's more than happy to run them away. So that's where a lot of the focus is right now. Again, if you're going Mutalisk as a Zerg player, a lot of your focus is on your Mutalisks, and the other half of your focus is on continuing to build drones, all the buildings you want, blah, blah, blah. But here, it's, you know, all the buildings you want, and all the tech you want, and all the patterns you want, and these Lurkers in the middle of the map. Sort of same level of focus. So, I mean, I'm not just considering the resources of minerals and gas, but let's also consider the resources of how much time do we actually have. And we're going to end up spending about the same amount of actions and the same amount of focus to do what we're seeing right here. And see those Lurkers that Calm has? They're sort of slowly pushing forward. And an excellent technique that I just completely stole as a result of this build, which is to very quickly take the top left main. I don't know if we're going to see it right now. I recall it happening relatively soon. Yeah, here it is. But still, we've been making almost exclusively drones. We're getting super fast defilers. So let's think about what position that puts us in. We're not really going to have the best control over the ground of the middle of the map. You know, if you open up with Mutalisk Harass, you get to really get into your opponent's face, so he has to pull back, so you can run your Lurkers right up to the front of his base, and suddenly the whole map's yours, and you have complete freedom of movement to wander around. And then when you hold that off, you know, when the Terran push starts coming out and you have to pull back, you get defilers, and that's what lets you spring forward. You have all these units you've been building, and the defilers finally let you push back. When you're doing this style of build, you're kind of getting a lot of money now, but not so many units. And it's going to be a little bit difficult to sort of do that big push forward after you get the defilers to allow you to take more expansions. Which is why I love this idea of taking the opposite mains quickly, because essentially you're saying, I don't actually need to do huge attacks to kill you off. If I'm here and I have this main and this main, that pretty much means that I have secured this expo and this expo. And really that means my Terran opponent is limited to this expansion at the bottom and this expansion at the left. And I have easy push distances to both of them. Absolutely brilliant play. In other words, the late game plan right here is just to play defensively, to hold these expansions, to slowly sort of ooze out and take the other naturals, and use them as docking points for the future Terran expansions. I mean, very defensively oriented game. Brilliantly executed. Calm also did this, I believe it was in the Pro League semifinals against some Terran, I can't remember who it was, but Calm, I believe, was bottom left in that game. That's about as much information as I can give, but incredible job by Calm. And that's what made it really, really fun for me to rewatch that, is I was thinking, does this build demand surprise? Does this style of play with these Lurkers first demand surprise? And really, it ends up being pretty stable. And this, you know, is unfortunate. That right there is an example. Oh, the Doom Zoom. I always love it when they do that. You know, like, Calm's freaking out that he lost 5 Lurkers, you know. But anyways, those 5 Lurkers dying, that's a great example of how you're going to struggle a little bit to control the portions of land that you want to control with this opening, in the center at the very least. Controlling the ramps is no problem at all. And look at these defilers. These defilers are out, no problem at all. Notice that there is not even a vessel there with this push. This push is coming out before the science vessel. I think the science vessel is a little bit late, but I mean, still, imagine if this push had a science vessel. Those defilers are still out in time. Look at this. Plenty of time with those defilers. And see, I already like this organization. Let me pause it on a clearer frame. There's a Nydus canal right up here in this top corner, which goes to this bottom right base, and then the left Nydus canal goes to the left base. Super awesome. And you know, I'm not sure if we're going to see it in this game. I believe it was in this game, but I can't really recall. Oh, and by the way, you know, we're seeing some nice little pushing action coming out here. Anytime you have Lurkers and Defilers, it's really important that you not only just do some pushing action like this, but notice that almost immediately Calm took some units and is going to come around and do that. Absolutely essential for strong mid-game play. We saw GG play do that against Iris to great effect. Yep, nice little Scourgy action going on there. Still not really very much center control by Calm. And there was something else I was going to say. Oh yeah, I don't know if we're going to see this in this game, but a lot of players will Nydus from their main to the, or from their natural to the bottom right, and from their natural to the top left, just like we're seeing right there on the screen. But then when they take this natural, you know, the bottom right main's natural, they'll rely on the Nydus canal in this bottom right corner to ferry units there. There's nothing wrong with spending the extra little bit of minerals to build an extra Nydus canal from your main's natural to the bottom right main's natural to that 4 o'clock expansion. Because there's a lot of circumstances where if you Nydus guys to bottom right, it just takes a few extra seconds to get them to that expo, and that's sometimes a little bit too much. Just throwing it out there as a suggestion for any of you who are having trouble, or excuse me, having no trouble getting this main, but having a little bit of trouble holding that expo. Excellent technique to do so. And we're seeing the usual sort of transition happen right here by Iris. He's going to make his factories stop producing gas units, that is, stop producing tanks, and he's going to instead spend all his gas on dropships and science vessels. So yeah, look at this. Just using the cracklings to kill off that bottom side. Freeing up some movement paths. And here come the dropships. Wah! And right now, watch how artful this defense is. Look at this. He's just going to throw down a few swarms, and it's really not going to be a big deal. I mean, preferably don't consume the overlords. But notice this nice little spread of lurkers here. Very, very good spread right there. I mean, a lot of times players will just continue to burrow lurkers right here at the ramp, or they'll have lurkers here at the ramp and lurkers here in the main. But look at this, just a little tiny line, how it just completely shut this drop down. Now, what we're seeing right now is a transition of Calm into Hydralisks in the late game. He does tend to prefer that over Ultralisks in the game I've seen. And look at this, yeah, 2 evolution chambers already. He's already got the +1 carapace. I mean, let's ignore that late game transition for a moment and just think right now about how strong Calm's mid game was, where he's making all those drones, taking top left and bottom right, and getting all those upgrades, and just fantastic, fantastic, fantastic job by Calm. Absolutely love it. And see, look, Defiler's ready at both locations. Has some Lings hanging out with the Defilers. Has sunken colonies at each of these mains, or each of these expos. I mean, I think that's pretty significant. And look, a whole bunch of guys just sort of coming back out. Yeah, this is not going to go so well. So now let's talk about the Hydralisks. A lot of players would consider transitioning to Ultralisks here. Ultralisk Zergling is really good at crunching down on big armies in the center. They're really good at catching up to Medic Marine and flanking them and sort of shutting them down. But we've already seen Calm sort of spread himself out a lot. That was the advantage he bought himself in the mid-game. And Hydralisks are really nice because you can spread them out relatively easily, and they operate very well with Plague, and they operate very well defensively. Hydralisks are a little bit harder to do just huge, big pushes across open terrains. On more cramped map, like Peaks of Baekdu, you know, going Hydralisks over Ultralisks is actually ideal. But on this map, I'm convinced the reason that Calm's actually opting to do this Hydralisk transition is because it's much easier to defend these expansions. Largely due to the fact that you're pretty much just going to be swarming to defend any huge army, and it's these drops with a lot of little stuff wandering around, and Plague and Hydras just absolutely shut that down. Hydras are also going to be really effective against the vessels. You're going to have a few difficulties if your opponent gets a really high gas count, a really high tank count, but this sort of stuff that Calm's doing is really preventing any sort of big late game economy. Again, the Hydralisks are an incredibly strong defensive tool for being this spread out. We're seeing a little flinch from Iris in the Doom Zoom. And notice how Calm can pretty comfortably take the natural at the top left and the natural at the bottom right because of this sick, awesome killer planning. Just what a fun game to watch. And honestly, for any of you who pretty much always transition to Ultralisks and Zerglings and Defilers in the late game, try out this style as practice for transitioning into Hydralisks in the late game, just so you have a good foundation to practice getting a bunch of Hydralisks in the late game. I mean, it's good to feel what Hydralisks and Zerglings and Defilers and Lurkers feel like, but you got to make sure that you're not just sort of doing it in a nonsensical way. So that's why I like this build a lot. And look at this. Look at that Plague and the Hydralisks come in. I mean, imagine how many drops that you have experienced, or even you have done, or have seen, where the Terran drops a bunch of stuff, and the Lurkers and the Lings are trying to run up to kill off all these units, and pretty much rudimentary micro, nothing too fancy, completely shuts everything down. The Medic Marine just keep waltzing around, and there's almost nothing that the Zerg can do about it. That's where the Hydros really come into play. You can just do a Plague and just run up there with your Hydraling, and you don't even need to unburrow the Lurkers at your front. We are getting Ultralists because eventually we're going to have 6 gas. We're actually going to get 6 gas pretty quickly as Calm. Look how quickly he's getting that gas. That's so fast. I mean, we're not even that far into the game. What, we're at like the 15-minute mark, the 14-minute mark? Part of the reason that we're able to do that is because we have, a little bit of extra money. Because we're not really devoting tons and tons and tons to getting Ultralisks very, very, very quickly. And also because we set ourselves up in such a beautiful defensive position early on. So this is trademark Iris, right? I mean, even watching Iris versus GG play on Fantasy, I believe was the name of the map, that weird, like, incestuous crossbreed of a whole bunch of other famous maps. Iris did the same thing where he just got a bazillion dropships and did these like super drops in Calm's base. Now notice for a moment, just stop and be aware of the fact that Calm really has not moved into this square for a very long time. I mean, Calm's pretty much just hung out at this top left main, at the bottom right side, at here. There's just not that much attacking going on by Calm. He's not doing any sort of huge pushes. And notice how unbelievably aggressive Iris is being. And therefore think about how Calm's focus of being defensive, he can pull off. He is getting away with being ultra incredibly defensive in a relatively effective fashion. This is a little sloppy. We don't like this. We don't like that. That Defiler just sort of wandering around in the middle of nowhere. But we're going to see a nice Calm regroup and just sort of run up here and wipe this stuff out. So we're losing a Hatch. We lost the Ultralisk Cavern, but we now can use the Hydralisks and the Swarms to push the Medic Marine back pretty quickly. Just the fact that Lurkers take a few extra seconds to burrow is a pretty big pain in the ass. The Medic Marine can just get a few extra shots off. So this actually is a pretty devastating drop. Nice little Plague going on there. And at this point in the game, one might think, oh man, Iris has just done so much damage. There's no way that Calm can come back from this. But look at this. Calm already has this bottom right thing set up. He has top left set up. Even though he lost that hatch, he still has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hatcheries in order to replenish his army. What's most unfortunate is that he lost the evolution chambers. But look at these Hydralisks. Look at the number of Hydralisks there and how easily they're just going to clean all this junk up. That's what I really like about having Hydralisks. Sometimes it's difficult, to really articulate, but if you get a bunch of Hydralisks and a Defiler, or sometimes even not, you feel how easy it is to deal with drops. You feel how much easier it is to deal with drops than compared to Ling Lurker, or even Ultralisks. Because especially the time when a lot of drops happen, when you are going Ultralisks, you don't really have the upgrades for the Ultralisks yet, that sort of thing. And this is a little technique that I think is essential to pulling off this sort of play. I think 90% of players at low levels will have the Lurkers burrowed here, and when this push comes up, they'll just swarm the Lurkers right here. The important technique is to advance forward a little bit and swarm as far out as you possibly can. So that way you want to have space to back up a little bit. You want to have space to accumulate a big army, so that way you can actually advance forward if you need be. I'm hoping we can actually back up just a little bit because I want to maybe get a shot of the natural expansion. I'm not sure if we're going to get it. Let me actually just come to the main map. Imagine for a moment here that you're Zerg and you're at this bottom right place and you have Lurkers burrowed right here. And a big push comes up, and you just swarm the Lurkers that are right here. I'm specifically placing them here because of the way the ramp's set up. Now, let's say you want to put a whole bunch of Hydralisks and Zerglings, or even Ultralisk Zergling. You want to ferry them down the ramp, and then you want to push forward like this to kill off Terran units here. There's really not much space here to run these units down. Plus, if the tanks are sieged here, they can even be hitting stuff moving on the ramp. That's why we like to advance just a little bit forward to swarm, so that way we can get a little bit of extra space. We have some breathing room here. Yeah, look, very simple technique to do. Demands a little bit of extra watching of the mini-map, but I mean, just take a brief glance at the mini-map. Green is doing a good job of positioning overlords at key locations. And Iris is doing a good job of just macroing like a beast. Still not very much mining going on at that expansion. Or I guess I should say no mining is going on at that expansion. And really, in this position, the 7th and 8th gases, that top expansion and that right expansion, are going to be increasingly easy to take because it's tucked between pairs of our mains. I actually want to rewind a little bit to illustrate this grouping concept. So here's the Hydralisks that advance forward. There's the man controlling the Hydralisks. And the Lurkers that advance forward. So there's Iris, the man who's trying to break everything. And look at this. This is really convenient. This is the space I was talking about. We advanced here to swarm. Having this little extra bit of space is so key. We're seeing the Ultralisks being added back on. Still no Ultralisks yet off 5 geysers because we're spending a lot of our resources just continuing to make Hydras, Lurkers, and Defilers. We don't need to go kill our opponent right now. It's very useful just to be defensive. And that's what the Hydra, Lurk, Ling, Defiler combo is going to be good at. And then eventually, once we have a bazillion resources, the Ultralisks are sort of like the giant big period at the end of the sentence, you know? Like, yeah, we're done now. Yeah, there's the Ultralisks. Wow! I'm going to freak out with the commentators. Yeah, notice that there's an extra Nydus canal at that natural expansion. That Nydus canal is actually linking to that bottom right natural. In other words, there is a Nydus canal from this natural to this main, and a Nydus canal from this natural to this natural. Just a little bit of extra mobility. And it's sort of a funky technique, you know. A lot of times you just think, well, I have a Nydus to that general area. You know, you never stop to think about how useful it is just to get a few extra seconds, and it ends up being pretty instrumental. Yeah, and there's the Nydus canal right there. That's going to help out quite a bit. But again, still, very defensive play. Only one attack we've really seen, which is this walk of units there to this expansion. I wouldn't even really call the attack at this bottom expansion here with the Lurkers a big push, because, you know, it's connected to the bottom right main. And to be honest, that may have been something that dictated Calm's decision to expand to the bottom right as opposed to the top left, is the fact that he could abuse that expansion in that fashion. So yeah, see, look at all this extra space he has. Now the tanks have to unsiege and then move forward a little bit. And the usual Iris 4 dropship sort of going around to do stuff. Advancing a little bit, but, you know, don't advance without Swarm. Goes without saying. Everything's now pulling back, getting ready to hop into the main, I guess it is. I'd be a little careful not to bring everything out. But I actually don't remember how Calm deals with this. I guess he just loses his expansion here. And here comes another giganto push here. But we're starting to see for the first time, Calm's actually moving into the center. This is the sort of play that I call a momentum build, where you're just sort of holding back and defending and defending and defending. And then you come out with one huge push that does so much damage, you just win it right there. So I dislike the decision to, you know, lose the bottom right entirely. I think that could have been avoided. It's a nice big push going on by Calm. And we're seeing really the only way in which Calm was able to lose this bottom right is when he just pretty much completely abandoned defense of it to do this big push. But I mean, really here, he's just going to kill off this bottom expansion, and he's been starving Terran for so long that Calm is still way in the lead, because he has top left mining, he's about to get that natural at the top left. This is one instance where I actually think it's not a bad decision at all to sack 2 of your expansions in order to kill off the only mining expansion of your Terran buddy. That said, I still think it was entirely possible for Calm to just swarm and hold off this attack here, and then just swarm and continue to push guys here. I mean, you don't really have to force the issue when you do this sort of build, because really the focus of Calm's build is starvation. I am just going to, you know, outmine you to death. You can feel free to throw 4 dropships worth of units into my main, you know, irradiate everything, do giant pushes, but I'm just going to have so much resources in the end, you're just going to eventually burn out. Again, we've really seen 2 attacks on Terran. There was one little itty-bitty Hydra Lurker thing up to this left expansion, that is to this expansion here, and then one big attack that went like this for Calm. He took Ultras, Hydras, and Lings and went like that. But other than that, I mean, Nothing really is going on. We're starting to see now the Ultralisks are being useful. We can actually get control of the center. We can use our mobility of our Ultralisks to really surround stuff and do serious damage. But no sooner. We opted instead to get all those Hydralisks to really hold stuff off. And see, look, technically, I don't even think we needed Swarm right here. I mean, Calm just has so much stuff because he's been getting so many resources for so long. He just sort of runs his opponent over. And yeah, look, there's a bazillion tanks against these Ultralisks. There's a bunch of Irradiate, but it doesn't even really matter. I mean, I just think that's such an impressive display of, like, somewhat unusual. I don't want to call it unorthodox, and he is getting Lurkers against Terran, but I mean, that's such a cool way to go Lurkers. Oh my god, that's so sweet, right? He opens up, doesn't even really get any Zerglings. I mean, he pretty much just plays super defensively and says, I'm going to be defensive till you're dead. And that's like, oh yeah, nice, awesome. So Spenguin asks, why didn't Iris use that little passway to flank the natural? And the passway that Spenguin's referring to is almost certainly these little passageways here. So for instance, if we have Calm up here, and we end up sort of going like this to try to push in here, it's kind of hard. Zerg units get funneled into there. It feels like a nice position to attack from. The issue I have with doing that is that we have to position units here, and that's a lot of stuff up against this top wall. So a smart Zerg player will put 2 Lurkers and a swarm here, and then put like 6 Lurkers and some swarms here, and then slowly crunch into this army. I've actually ended up doing that before, and it was awesome, because I mean, I had like my 7-8 Lurkers, my Defilers, and like 4 Zerglings or something. I had like almost no Zerglings. I've been powering drones like a man. You know, building drones and no Zerglings help you grow hair on your chest, you know. And I was just prepared to use my my Lurkers and my Swarm to just hold off this mid-game push. Instead, the Terran put himself into this corner. And then I just sort of swarmed in a circle, and then I kind of relaxed a little bit, consumed some more, and then I just kept pushing in and crunched it. So although those side passageways at the naturals are cute little flanking positions and nice little strategic locations, I like them more for run-bys and cute little tactics as opposed to any sort of big push, because it's just so easy to lose if your opponent has Swarm. Now, if your opponent doesn't have Swarm, I really like that positioning. However, the only time that Terran really would be able to move into the middle of the map is right before Zerg gets Swarm. So I'm going to go ahead and mute the chat, so that way we can take a few more questions going on here. So let's take the question from, Rodrigo. This is an awesome question. So Rodrigo says, for Shotcoder, how do you deal with campers in general, in all matchups? Just briefly touch on each matchup. So, I mean, I like the sort of, I'm going to be defensive to death, you know? There's all sorts of ways to do that. I mean, I think the easiest examples of this for Terran, actually, in all 3 of the Terran matchups, is when you have a map like Destination or Sin Chu Peng Rayang, where there's an even split of resources, and then there's like these disputable expansions. Like, it's not clear who takes it. I'm going to load up. Matchpoint is another great example of this. For some reason, they all tend to be 128 by 96. That just happens to be coincidence. But, you know, if we go over to the main screen, we look at Matchpoint. If I'm here, I'm going to take this expansion, and almost certainly this expansion. But this top expo and this bottom expo, those are the disputable locations. It's not clear who is supposed to take those expansions. So when you're Terran, it's convenient to pretty much just turtle, and then to just make sure your opponent doesn't take those expos, because Terran pretty much always has an advantage if he can maintain equality of resources. Protoss is, you know, you're going to need a whole lot of Reavers to hold off everything, a lot of Corsairs, just a lot of gas units allow you to be very, very defensive, and then you end up spending your minerals on a lot of cannons. You know, I think a lot of those turtleish type plays, I think, are a lot of fun, you know, to be, like, very, very defensive. So what I would say is, let's talk about this from the defender standpoint, the person who's doing the camping, per se. Make sure you know what the focus of your camping is. Make sure that you are either trying to starve your opponent to death, or that, you know, you're waiting for your opponent to make a mistake so you can counter push him or something like that. A lot of times players will start holding themselves up really defensively. I think I most commonly see this in Terran vs. Protoss. You see the Terran player hold himself up like super defensively, He'll get in a position where he will be equal with Protoss and Expos, and really the Terran at that point should just hold his ground and do nothing, and eventually win when Protoss runs out of money. And instead what we see the Terran do is Terran says, well, I'm maxed, I mean, why would I sit here in my base? And then Terran just goes ahead and pushes, loses to some beautiful Stasis and, some Storms, and the Protoss can end up getting the advantage back. And Terran's just like, Protoss imbalance. But I mean, honestly, just make sure you have a very clear focus of what it is you want to do, and you don't do any of these sorts of impulse pushes. As the offensive person, a lot of times what's really nice to do is to set up these, I guess I want to call them multiple wave maxed attacks. I mean, so again, let's say we're against a Terran, and whether we're Zerg or Protoss, irrelevant. But let's say the Terran has this beautiful defensive standpoint. Let's say we're playing match point, and we have a lot of stuff going on here, a lot of units here. How do I break this? Well, what I could do is wait till I'm maxed. I could save up a bunch of money. I could get extra hatcheries and extra gateways. And then what I do is I attack in here, kill maybe 40-50% of this army, maybe even 60 or 70 if you're in real good shape. And then, because you have so many more unit-producing structures, you can get maxed again much more quickly than your opponent, and you end up breaking in there. You have to do these super forceful attacks where you basically throw as much resources as your opponent in as small amount of time as possible to break him. The other alternative is to just shoot lots of all-over-the-place harassment. Just send tons of Arbiters with recall to do a huge recall into his main, and then have a huge recall planned at the bottom right. You're still going to have that same theme of rebuilding very quickly and sort of hitting a bunch of places at once, but really I think those themes sort of hold true in all the matchups. Let's just go ahead and move on to another question, because I could talk about that for quite some time. So Nikon says, would you advocate getting a super early third and getting a ton of Hydroling to control the center of the map while expanding even more? So what I assume Nikon is asking, sort of as like a little extra add-on, is that we're not getting layer. Let's actually consider both of those. If we're not getting layer, you can actually hold the center for a decently long amount of time. With Hydralisks and Zerglings. The issue is when that big mid-game push happens. How would I put this? You're actually spending a pretty significant amount of resources on the Hydra Zergling just to sort of hold stuff off and trade. And a lot of good Terrans will add on a bunch of barracks and one or even two factories before the starport, because they look at what you're doing and they say, well, I don't really need to get science vessels all that fast. I just need to have more stuff. And that's where I think the issue is that Zerg can't quite combat the amount of stuff that Terran can get by opening just Hydra Zergling. That said, I don't have any problem with going Ling Lurker, expanding, and then taking a fourth gas really fast and getting even more units to continuing to expand. I think that's totally fine. Really, the issue is just that Medic Marine is just so strong, because Terran's imbalanced. Yeah, I just think that is the issue. Let's see. Okay, this is the most reasonable question from Capitalist. How does Terran deal with the camping Zerg? So, let's see. There's a number of ways. I mean, first of all, just continuing to do the pound you to death style play that we saw Iris do. I don't know if I'm a huge fan of this 4 dropship type stuff, but I mean, that's the correct idea, is that you do a big push. Probably a little bit more spreading out of Medic Marine would be good. You do these big pushes, where you move up to your opponent's front, and then you just start ferrying stuff in, and if he pulls too much stuff back, you can just hit his front. Doing a lot of stuff, moving in very aggressively with your vessels. Don't be scared to, take some serious hits on your vessels, even occasionally losing one or two if you can eliminate those key defilers. I mean, notice how much damage Iris was able to do with that big drop at the top right. If he had had more consecutive attacks prepared, he would have been in good shape. Another really excellent tool is actually getting battle cruisers. I actually like just getting 2 battle cruisers, not like suddenly going mass battle cruisers. But especially if you can keep your Zerg opponent relatively low on gas, or have a lot of his gas being spent already. By getting battle cruisers, your Zerg opponent really has to get a ton of Scourge if he wants to effectively kill him off, and that's a ton of gas the Zerg doesn't want to spend on Scourge. He instead wants to be spending it on Lurkers and Defilers. I actually kind of like the Battlecruiser transition. It's clearly more effective if your opponent is going for Ultralisks instead of for Hydralisks, but still something to consider. Just very, very, very huge aggression and planting mines at any place where you're worried about counterattacking. But, just really pounding your opponent apart and not being afraid to lose a bunch of units. Just really sort of jamming your face in there. So, let's see. There's some questions about queens. I'm not so sure queens would be useful. I mean, really, the question was, would there be any advantage to getting that early queen's nest for queens instead of taking straight to hive? I think the issue is that you need a lot of units plus a queen to do a ton of damage, and without really that many units, you're not really going to do very much damage. I mean, this build, make sure you're consistent with what's doing with the idea behind your build. You want to be expanding a lot. You want to be defending a lot. You want to be starving a lot. You don't really want to be getting queens just for the sake of getting queens, because you need the units to back them up, and you just don't really have that in this build. So let's just go ahead and take one more question from Original Impersonator. Let's see here. Do you think there are many top players who have great micro mechanics but don't have as great strategical tactical intellect as you do, for example? I'm going to reword that question, because I don't want to be so arrogant as to be like, oh, of course there's plenty of players who are just nowhere near as smart as I am. I think I have one thing I really want to illustrate is how important micro and macro and just good control and smoothness of play is. That's so key. I mean, really, if you can get good mechanics down and just have very few strategies, not a huge gamut of play at your fingertips, you can get to BB plus relatively easily. I mean, mechanics are just so significant. So what I would say is that I do think that because those things are so strong and so helpful, that there are a lot of players who don't put a lot of thought into what it is they're doing. There's a lot of people who are just a little bit afraid to break rules. Because you get into robot mode. A lot of times it's really easy to get into robot mode in this game. Because they won't look at a map. Like, for instance, Colm looked at this map, and Colm just went, I'm not opening Mutalisks, I'm going to open Lurkers. And I'm not going to make any Mutalisks this whole game. I'm probably not going to really attack this whole game. And just did something really unusual that I've only ever seen him do, because he just did what he thought was good, and then he backs it up with all this amazing execution, and then bam, he's in a beautiful position. And then, what the really good players like Colm will do is do little tiny adjustments, like at the bottom right, for instance. We saw some drops go on there early, and weirdly enough, Calm already had this concave of Lurkers there, and it denied the drop so harshly, completely shut it down. It was unbelievably kick-ass, and that's the little sort of thing that I think separates the A or B level player from the super high level player, is that willingness to play around in the space. So I think that's perhaps an advantage I've had over time, in that I don't really view things as orthodox or unorthodox. I view it more as, how do I solve this little problem right now? I'm going to ignore what everyone else is doing. I have this problem. How do I solve it? Doing little weird things like going 9 hatch 11 pool instead of 12 hatch 11 pool. There's a solution for dealing with bunker rushes, because you get the creep out really early, you can build a sunken colony. Doing something little like that, I think, is something awesome. Sorry, I have a little bit of an itch there. So, yeah, you know what? That is going to wrap up Day 9 Daily number 56. That is, that's it. That's all I have to say about that. You guys should tune in tomorrow. It's going to be on at 9 p.m. tomorrow. I apologize a little bit for the scheduling that I have to do. I just have these classes, and I have to be like a student because I'm getting a graduate degree. But it's okay, and it's totally worth it, because I have kick-ass classmates like Hua who propose ninja cooking games. So, yeah. I want to let everyone know that we are still doing the replay submissions. That's going to be Day 9 Daily number 60, is I'm going to be reviewing those low-level replays. today's date, once again, is January 26th. If it's not between the 26th and like the 31st, if you're watching this on demand, don't send me a replay, because I got a replay from someone who was like, hey, I'm ready for the submissions. I'm like, you're 4 months too late. So when you submit it, in the PM me on Team Liquid under the name Day9, say that it's for the replay analysis, say what the matchup is, have a link to the replay, and then just have 3 or 4 sentences describing the game. Do not put more than that, because it's really important that you can boil down everything that went on in the game and the issue you're thinking about into a concise, clean description. And that's what would be fantastic, and then I will be doing the usual random selection thing, and I hope to check them out. Thanks so much, everyone, and cheers.